I would like to introduce a gentleman who's done a tremendous job, not only for St. Bernard Parish, but for the whole area, and their team for all that they have done through the years. So, ladies and gentlemen, Barry Lemoine. Barry?
I'd like to thank Dr. Warner for saying that I'm young. That's good to hear. And I'd like to thank y'all for coming out today. When I was trying to figure out, I'm following some pretty big footsteps here between William DeMarini Highland, who've come and he spoke with much trepidation about the history of theater here in St. Bernard. And then, of course, maybe the folksy charm of Dr. Manning, who sometimes comes up here and brings up his mascot and let's do a little juggling act. And I think you're going to like it. I think you're going to like it. But, as an actor, it's important to be yourself. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, today I'm presenting to you what I like to call the history of theater in St. Bernard abridged. Now, I say abridged for two reasons. One, because of the constraints of time, and two, because of the constraints of my knowledge. Basically, there's not a lot written about St. Bernard theater. Mostly what I've gotten is either from scrapbooks, which there are not a lot of in this parish anymore, and from the memories of people, and we know how memories are sometimes. So I did what I always do, is I consulted with some of the local experts and kind of picked their brain, and basically we put our heads together and we came up with what we like to consider based on a true story. Because you're not sure really how much of this history is 100% accurate, but it is a story and it's about storytelling. So we thought what better place than to start about the history of storytelling than with the native people who were here for hundreds of years when we discovered their land, the Indians. But I had some reservations about talking about storytelling there. But we know that oral tradition is a big part of the Native American people. But we said, no, let's fast forward a little bit and talk a little bit about the European influence, the Isleños culture. And I know that there was a play that was done in 1997 that celebrated the Isleño culture. It was called The Light in the Trees, and it was directed by Lenny Umbahagen. But basically, narrative songs, or the decimas, were a big part of that oral history. But for tonight's discussion, we thought that we would limit the influence of theater to be just from what we call from the page to the stage, something that was written for the stage and performed on the stage. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And based on what I was able to gather so far, throughout the history, schools have always done a lot of productions, but when we're talking about a community-wide celebration, the first group that comes to mind would be the Community Actors of St. Bernard. Now, they were founded sometime in the mid-1960s, and they were very, very active. In fact, they were producing shows right up until the time of the hurricane. This is in no particular order, but you see some of the players there. You see people like Tony Ortego, Conrad Childress, who's a Nunez guy, Miss Kathy Mayer, Jude Palomo, who served as the president of CAST for many years, and of course, Mary Burns, who was also a part of the Shines group. She directed the last show that took place here at Nunez for the Community Actors of St. Bernard, and that was a play called The Women, and that was in 2005. So you can see that CAST had a long history, and they've not been back since the storm, but they were active for many years in the community. And there's one lady whose name that was on that list as we were flipping through, whose name was Pat Babin. Now, Miss Babin has a big influence on the history of theater in St. Bernard. She's collaborated with all kinds of people, and she's most famous probably for her work that she does at Shelmont High School with CHS Live. In fact, I think she's at rehearsal right now. They have a show that's opening up next week. It's a Christmas show. But Miss Babin has worked pretty regularly over the last several years, as you can see, with Mr. Tom Duggar, who's an award-winning actor and a great English teacher. And she's worked with other people, as you can see here in the early years. They do musicals, they do classic shows, they do some farcical comedy. So they've done a lot of good stuff. And in fact, I think one of the CHS Live performers, Will Schneider's in the house today, and he's been a big part of CHS Live. And they've even done some alumni productions. So that's Pat Babin and CHS Live. And meanwhile, when I came to St. Bernard and started my teaching career down here, that was in the mid-1990s, and I was blessed to have the opportunity to meet my theatrical mentor, Mr. Dave Dessens, who's been doing theater for like 30 years, who's been promoted to working the camera. Theater pays well. But anyway, I teamed up with Mr. Dessens, and we produced a show called The Apple Tree. And it was a musical, and we worked with Bill Thomas, who's also worked with Pat Babin at Shelmet High. And then I wrote my first play. I had written screenplays prior to this, and you need like millions of dollars to do a film, but you only need like thousands of dollars to do a play. So I said, well, let me try my hand at that. So I had done a play called The Merchant of Venice, Louisiana. And the last play that I did, working with the students of Andrew Jackson High School, was a play called An Evening with Betsy, Voices from the Storm. I was trying to teach my students the art of listening, so I had them interview storm survivors, and from those narratives, we basically made a play. And from the heels of that success, we came to Nunez, we formed Shine Productions, and Rosemary Sand, who met her husband in a hurricane shelter in 1965, she was one of my original storytellers. She came to me, we decided that we were going to try to see, would this community support a theater group just like Rivertown is supported in Kenner, just like Slidell Little Theater in St. Tammany. So we decided we were going to give it a go. So we talked to Dr. Warner about bringing 2 seasons of shows here at Nunez. We were going to do 4 shows for 2 years, and we were going to see how it went. So we did a bunch of shows, as you can see. Some of them were here, and some of them were in different venues. We just finished a run of Bless You Boys that we did at Flower Power first, and then recently we did it at Flower Power and then at Le Chat-Noir, and it went pretty well. If you're a Saints fan, you know that we've been suffering a lot lately, so it was good to have laughter come in. Voices from the Storm was probably our most successful play that we did because it kind of struck a chord with a lot of people who had survived Betsy, because prior to Katrina, people's lives were dated as before Betsy and after Betsy, and now our lives are dated by the Katrina catastrophe. But we did some classic stuff. We did some really, we were proud of. We brought Shakespeare here. We brought Twelfth Night. And then in 2003, we did a play called Louisiana Purchase, or as we like to say, Purchase, because it was based on the comic book of John Churchill Chase. And I was very fortunate to get to work with Mr. Ron Chapman, because basically the Tourism Commission had asked if I would write a play about the Louisiana Purchase, and based on my knowledge of it, I said, sure. So Mr. Chapman gave me a comic book to read. He said, this might help you out. And it was really good. So he said, hey, let's just adapt that comic book, and we'll put it on the stage. And that's how Louisiana Purchase came about. And then we also did some musicals with Tony Ortega and B. Valentine, and then Lenny Umberhagen, who's now, I think, employed at Nunez, is also a big factor. Here are our favorite shiny moments. Our 2001 production of An Evening with Betsy, Voices from the Storm, garnered 2 Big Easy Awards. And it was the first time in the history of New Orleans theater that a St. Bernard group had been recognized. So we got 2 nominations. We didn't win, but we got nominated, and it was just an honor to be nominated. That's what everybody who loses says that, yeah. And then in 2003, our celebration of the Louisiana Purchase was the signature event of the bicentennial statewide, so we were real proud of that, and we brought a lot of kids in to see it. And then in 2004, we'd done a production of The Altos at the Rocky and Carly Sicilian Room, because when you think theater, you think Rocky and Carlos. And we ran pretty much nonstop 7 consecutive months, and to my knowledge, that's probably the longest show that's ever run in St. Bernard. And it was through our affiliation here at Nunez that we got to meet some of the people who were involved in the Nunez community theater scene and the college scene. They could do a little more artsy and experimental work as the college. So Kevin Ward was here when we first started, and then Greg Stratton was here for a while, and then our host for tonight, a very talented gentleman. And if you've not got a chance to see Nick on stage, he's very, very good as an actor, and he's a wonderful guy. He has his own production company called Mondo Bizarro. So he's currently the director here at Nunez. And I mentioned Lenny Umberhagen. Lenny was real influential at Hannon High School. In fact, when everybody would go see a Hannon show, they knew it was Lenny's work. Not only is he a talented performer, he's a great, great artist. So a lot of Lenny's work has been seen by a lot of people, and he's been a real big influence. His artwork, his set design. In fact, for the Hurricane Betsy play, Lenny had done the set for that. Very talented guy, and I think Nunez is lucky to have him working for him here. And then, the list can go on, and I know that we're going to have to be real brief because of the film that we're showing behind, but this is basically some of the other additional theater contributions that were made. One of the big ones would be Mr. Charles Cassar, who's trying to generate the next generation of actors and audience members and performers, and he's done that through his Summer Discovery program. He's done that by working with the young kids at the Academy. So he's been real influential. But I've been real blessed in that not only do I work for the school system for the TV studio, I get to meet a lot of the people at the schools, but at the same time, I wrote a column for many years called Bravo, which kind of highlights the performing arts here in St. Bernard Parish. So I really got a chance to meet a lot of people who were doing the things that they loved, and that was real, I felt real blessed for that. And at one point in time, every school had theater going on. Every school was doing some kind of drama production, Catholic school, private school, middle school, high school. Peggy Wagner was a big influence at Tris, so I feel really lucky. So as we say, all the world is a stage, and in addition to the space that we're in now, we've tried to make spaces into stages to bring different shows to different parts of the parish. So, we had Flower Power was one place. We had the Harbor View Reception Hall where we did the 5 women. I mentioned the Sicilian Room. Our good friends over at Flower Power. We were real blessed to have a chance to perform at the Scotia Prince, which was that cruise ship, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And of course, the Riverbend Bistro, we recently performed there, and of course, which theater season would be complete without performing at the Fat Boys Lounge for some of our other shows. Shine After Dark we did there, but it's now defunct and now it's Brad's. But this is just a little bit of the places that we've explored in trying to bring theater to the community of St. Bernard. Now, everything changed for everyone else, just like it did for us at Shine. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina hit, and it made Betsy kind of not as important to us, and we lost everything, just like all of you. In fact, I think there were fish on this stage, and our Shine production office was right down the street. So we lost all of our sets, all of our costumes, all of our posters, pretty much everything that we had worked for about 4 or 5 years to try to generate. And we lost all of our mailing lists, and all the people on our mailing list lost their houses, so it kind of was didn't really. So in September of 2005, I started thinking that we were in trouble, and how would we preserve the culture of this community? So we started a nonprofit group called the Voices Foundation that was committed to keeping theater, storytelling, and the history of this parish alive. So we formed this nonprofit group, and then we decided, okay, we were going to be the Evacuation Theater Troupe. And we were going to try to just focus strictly on comedy, because we felt like this community really needed to laugh, because the lives were so bleak and the news was so bad that we just wanted to make people laugh. So we were real fortunate to go on the Scotia Prince in Violet. It was docked down there, and they had probably 600 people living on this little bitty cramped ferry, and we did a show, and it was really fun, and people laughed, and it was probably the first time we had heard laughter around here. And that was kind of a turning point for us, where we really thought, you know what, it feels good to make people laugh, but it feels even better to kind of represent our community. So we decided that we were going to try to be like ambassadors to the community. So we formed the Evacuation Theater Troupe, and we decided that we were going to take our story on the road. And that's what we did, and that's what the film's going to tell you a little bit about. So if we can go to the next slide. So I thought long and hard about which show should we take on the road. And I decided that one of the best things we could do is if we took the Voices from the Storm component of An Evening with Betsy and the Louisiana history from the Louisiana Purchase, and we put them together, it would form the Voices of Louisiana. So the Voices of Louisiana is the show that we decided to tour, and we were trying to decide where were we going to go and which story would we tell. So once we had the script kind of intact, we decided that what we would do is we would go into all the states that made up the original Louisiana Purchase. And the message basically would be that just as New Orleans was critical to our nation's past, so too would its rebirth be critical to our nation's future. So we went into all the states of Louisiana Purchase. So basically we left 7 actors, a 37-foot RV, and we had never driven an RV before, much less lived in one. And we went all the way to the headwaters of the Mississippi in Minnesota, and then all the way back. And we took gigs wherever we could get them, and we performed to spread the word, basically telling people that, thank you for your continued support of us. We got a long way to go. And, a lot of people didn't know our story. A lot of people didn't know about the oil spill. A lot of people had heard of the Ninth Ward, but had not heard of St. Bernard Parish. So one of the messages that we wanted to convey to those people was that, here in St. Bernard, mold is not the only culture that we have. So that was kind of the message that we were trying to share with some people. So anyway, that kind of is going to just be, I know it's a real brief and fast overview because I want to let the film speak for itself, and maybe at another time we'll get more history and more involved in theater. In fact, any help that you could give in filling in the blanks of the history would be really appreciated. But without further ado, I'd like to present to you the film now. Jack Jackson Jr., who's a very talented young guy, did the editing for this. Rosemary Sand, Annette Campo, and I did the writing, and the Evacuation Theater Troupe did the acting. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time, we present to you Voices from Louisiana. Thank you. This is the place that I am from, home of one of the most important military victories in our nation's history, the Battle of New Orleans, fought bravely by a band of pirates, Indians, blacks, and pioneers, fighting to the death below sea level, 12 days after the war had already ended. That's New Orleans for you.
This is my home, where a levee, a cruise ship, an oil refinery, a plantation, and a smokestack are all odd neighbors.
This is my place. A place of family and festivals and Mardi Gras. Some of the best food in the world and some of the most unhealthy people eating lots of it.
This is the Parish, St. Bernard, settled by the Canary Islanders in 1687. New Orleans' historic neighbor, located only 2 miles east of the 9th Ward, and until 2005, home of 70,000 people.
This is a community where over 120 people drowned from waters that breached our levee system, where human error cost human lives.
This is the place that used to be surrounded by cypress trees until Mr. Go made them go. This is the site of the largest residential oil spill in the history of our nation, the only parish to be declared 100% devastated, and yet few people have heard of us.
This is the place that fishermen, blue-collar workers, ordinary folks, and a theater troupe call home. We are the Evacuation Theater Troupe.
We are the Voices of Louisiana, and this is our story.
How y'all doing? Good. All right. That's right, I said y'all too. On behalf of the Evacuation Theater Troupe, give them a hand. How about that? I'd like to welcome y'all here tonight. My name is Christian Bordelon, and I'm going to be one of the voices of Louisiana that you'll hear tonight, all right? Odd, being away from that place that we love and call home, but we're going out there to share the history and the heartache that unites us all.
Why this road trip? Well, there's been a lot of things happening lately between Milton's death, my dad's surgery, RV shopping, the New York trip. But what's becoming clearer for me is to speak through drama about our community's collective loss.
One of the blessings of this trip has been the opportunity to enjoy the natural beauty that exists in mid-America. The rolling farmland of Iowa, the flat plains of Kansas. As for the people we've met along the way, they've been unfailingly friendly and welcoming.
Well, this is day 8. We've reached the 1-week mark on our fantastic voyage. So far, everyone is still alive, apart from Tom hitting his head numerous times, stubbing his toe, and nearly being caught on fire. I did a lot of thinking, and I'm still trying to soak in just how lucky we are to see the things we're seeing.
It was kind of fun. We kind of became like a little family. Rose and Tom were like the mom and dad. Me, Chris, and Barry, we were the troubled children, and Katie and Shannon were, well, like the girls.
For me, mountain panoramas bring on memories of another time, another life. I cannot drive through a beautiful scene without aching for the home and loved ones I've lost.
I am here to learn. Not just things like how to change a solenoid in an RV, but everything that my troop members have to offer. Strength from Rose, confidence from Will, leadership from Barry, love from Katie, kindness from Shannon, and wisdom from Tom. I am here to appreciate the fact that one of the best parts of any trip is coming home, no matter how destroyed it is.
I had to leave my mom, and that was the hardest part for me. She is my rock. But she said, "Shannon, you need to do this. You need to live life to the fullest." And she knows a lot about living.
Yeah, getting my tattoo hurt a lot, but it's a lifetime reminder of the trip of a lifetime. It's about storytelling and art. It's about Louisiana and nature. It's about the end of our day today and the hope of what tomorrow may bring. When I drove into the parish for the first time, into St. Bernard Parish, you had to have an ID to even get in. They had a military barricade. They had helicopters flying all over. There was just water everywhere. And cars were where they shouldn't have been. They had cars on top of houses. They had just mud and muck and mildew, and just everywhere you looked, it was just it was like a war zone, and you couldn't believe that this was, maybe 3 weeks after the storm, and it still was that bad looking. I remember when I drove into my neighborhood, the power lines were all over the place. You had to be careful where you were going. You couldn't really tell where the street started and the lawns ended because everything was covered in mud and, just the filth. And the thing that you really noticed was an absence of color. When I drove away for the first time, it was just so depressing that you could never imagine it being safe to come back. There was all the contaminants. You were worried about the oil, and you were worried about the carcinogens that were in the ground or within the air. And then when I rounded the corner on the way out of here, I looked back one time and was kind of putting my life in the rearview mirror.
Driving through that area first was just unbelievable. I mean, it was rough. It was really, really, really rough. And so, coming over the Claiborne Bridge, we could see where the barge came through the levee, and the barge was sitting on top of a school bus, and we were thinking, this is not good. And we could see just those whole first 5, 6 blocks in the ninth ward just completely demolished. And you're seeing it and you're taking it in, but it's so much.
What I noticed was there was a persimmon tree in the backyard, and everything was gray and muddy, and there was this beautiful fruit tree with this orange fruit on it. And I felt like if nature can come back, well, so can we.
You couldn't believe that an entire community could be wiped out. You're evacuated and you think, okay, maybe a tree busted my window or something fell on my car, but you finally get pictures of how it looked, and you finally get to come back to see it, and it's not that at all.
And one of the most difficult things about this storm that passed was the loss. Not the personal property, you can always replace those things, but the friends, the family, the neighbors that were all such a part of our daily lives are all gone. One day, you're a community of 70,000 with schools, a coffee shop, a movie theater, a skating rink, and the next day you're on a frontier. One day you're making fun of people who live in trailers, the next day you're jealous. But the evacuation theater troop, just like everybody else, we all evacuated.
It was difficult for everybody because, once again, we come from a time and place where we were right around the corner from each other, but now we have to travel a long distance just to say hi. So we meet at Rose's apartment in Baton Rouge and have some very, very tearful reunions, and start brainstorming right there, just kind of on the spot.
But we decided that people needed to laugh because the lives were so bad and so bleak and the news wasn't getting any better. So we decided to do comedy. So we did a couple of shows on the boat, and it was the first time that we had performed, and we performed for like the emergency workers and the firemen and the cops.
And on that particular night, a news crew was there and they had filmed it and played it over the news. The next day, we get an email from the parents of this particular fireman. It was a young guy, thanking us because this was the first time that they had seen their boy smile since the storm.
So Barry had a vision, a dream.
So I told my wife, honey, Barry has a dream.
Barry had this dream years ago.
What I remember was a conversation. Barry had come to my house not long after Milton died, and we were talking about things, possibilities that we could do. And when Barry was telling me about this idea of going on the road with our group, it struck me that this was exactly what I needed at the time that I needed it.
Well, you know, Barry had talked about it. Of course, Barry talks about a lot of things, but he had talked about it even before the storm. But after the storm, you know, he felt like, well, if I'm ever going to do this kind of thing, now's the time to do it. You know, I don't have a job, I don't have a house. This is a good time to hit the road.
I don't know if I was the first. I know I was one of the first ones that he had approached because we had always talked about it, and I was 100% yes, I'm doing it. I don't care who's going, even if it's just me and you. We're going on this tour, and we're going to tell people our story, and we're going to have a hell of a time doing it.
So I had the dream of taking this evacuation theater troupe on the road. Now, the only thing that we needed was everything. You know, we needed costumes, we needed people, we needed technical equipment, we needed audience, we needed transportation. We started thinking about, well, which show would we do? And we knew we couldn't really just do a hurricane show because I think people would kind of get tired of just hearing about a hurricane. So we came up with the Voices of Louisiana, which is kind of written in 3 sections. And the first section is 300 years of history and about 30 minutes of cartoon foolishness. Will Schneider, who plays the Queen of Spain, he has a long history of playing in drag.
I come out in character as the Queen of Spain, and she is sexy, absolutely gorgeously sexy, okay? Think about that. Chris and I have beautiful chemistry, Napoleon and the Queen. We have a lot of love going on there.
And then the middle section, we kind of talk about the colorful characters that have shaped our history, whether it's the politicians or the celebrities or the food or the music, the culture.
The middle part of the show, that was just creative people being creative.
Truman Capote in it, and Anne Rice, we should mention her. Ellen DeGeneres is from New Orleans. We just started talking about the people from New Orleans, and well, how do you put all these people together? So I thought of doing, one kind of show, one telethon or something that they'd all be on, and then I think Rose was actually maybe the person who suggested that we have, consider the stage as 3 different channels, and the viewer would be kind of flicking back and forth from one to the next, and that would give us the freedom to not have one show. We could have different things. I mean, we could have the ESPN network, and we could have the History Channel, and we could have what have you. That really opened it up.
And then, of course, Ellen DeGeneres. I love Ellen DeGeneres. I mean, she is from New Orleans, obviously, and has done so much for New Orleans. She likes to call herself, I've heard her say, the dancing diva of New Orleans.
Keep your spirits up, find a way to laugh, and do what we do best in New Orleans. Dance!
And we end it with kind of a poignant piece about the losses that we have faced and how hard it is to rebuild our lives and how important it is to come home and how we're all united by our love of home and our humanity.
The final section where where Chris plays Charlie, kind of an everyman, a New Orleans everyman, summarizes, why New Orleans is, why other people should care about New Orleans.
That's a hard word to come by these days. Dignity. Chocolate, vanilla. That storm didn't know no color. No regard for who you were or what you did for a living. Or who was taken down with it, huh? Damn near took all of us down just a few hours.
So for me, Charlie is my grandfather. He passed away. He passed away in February after the storm. The storm was in August. He had taken care of everybody throughout their entire life. Anybody who had a problem could always come to this house. This was the safe point. This was the safe haven of our family. And because of the storm, my grandfather couldn't die in his own house.
Being on the road and sharing that message with other people, we felt like we were being ambassadors to our community.
What I'm most anxious about, having a complete success, making this a career, to do something you love and for a noble cause. How can you get much higher than that?
I am an ambassador of Louisiana to these various other places that we're going to visit, and I'm going to be attempting to represent the history, the culture, the people of Louisiana, to be a goodwill ambassador, and also interested in the cultural exchange. I want to know about the people that I'm visiting.
Do I have enough light to see all the things that will be available to me on this tour? How much will I learn? How much will I be able to take back? How much will I miss home? How much will I be missed?
It was crazy at times. It was so much fun and so meaningful, especially to get to know these 6 other people in this intimate setting of living together and sleeping on the floor and having people all over the place. The joy of waking up each morning in that cramped little RV and know that somebody's going to make you smile in 2 seconds. Somebody's always going to be there for you.
We stayed for the most part in state parks. I learned some skills as far as dealing with the waste matter in an RV that I never would have learned otherwise, and that I will never apply again because I'll never own an RV, ever in my life would I own an RV. And I would advise anyone who's watching this to not ever purchase an RV. But having said that, it was a positive experience. It really was. I slept outside as much as I could until the weather started getting really, really cold.
The trip to me was a poignant reminder of strength in people, strength in numbers. All of us, are family. We're not just friends, we're family. And going away together to share nature and to share, this journey together meant a lot to me.
Sometimes I don't know which way I'm going. I think of all the places that I've been.
Driving the RV wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. The RV always followed the truck, and Rose and Tom had a difficult time. I don't want to say keeping up with me because they didn't think twice about actually keeping up with me. They were gone. If you think about it, in the truck there was a PhD, a salutatorian, 2 very educated, strong, powerful women, a GPS system, and dogs with enhanced sense of smell, and for some reason we're taking wrong turns. I didn't really get that.
and they had all the maps.
Finally, our first day to perform on the road, the kids loved the show, and when it was over, we got to interview 2 kids that had moved to Oklahoma because they were also devastated by Katrina. Open arms, open arms. From what I've heard from Will and the people we've met, I think it's going to be a great show.
I think of all the performances, the one that that stands out for me was the one at McPherson, Kansas.
When Barry first approached me about it, I was like, all right, we're doing this tour. If we don't go anywhere, the only place that I really die and I have to go to is McPherson College. They will be so open to us and bring us all in. The town, the people there, the city, they, you know, pretty much saved my life and my parents and my whole family.
Great audience, and they were so thankful, standing and people coming through the line and shaking. They were so thankful that we were there. And you felt it. You felt it when they shook your hand and they looked into your eyes.
It was just amazing. It was like a homecoming. I was, you know, coming back home, and then I forgot, with Barry and them, they started calling McPherson Willville or Willtown, something like that. And we're all standing there holding hands, and I'm just saying, you know, getting ready to say my line. And as soon as I say like the first 2 words, I couldn't help it. Like tears just started flowing out of my eyes. And then it happened, and I cried, and I put my head down, and Shannon squeezed my hand, and I looked back up, and the first thing I saw was my mom and dad sitting there just crying, because I could just, I don't know, I'm getting emotional right now thinking about it.
My line is, it is perhaps our very gentleness that gives us the resiliency to rebuild. Everybody has something they say in the end. And when Will says the clock always ticked, you know, I could hear the crack in his voice. I could hear him cry, because I knew at that moment that this was a big deal to him.
Just knowing that these people took us in and donated what they did for us, it's absolutely unbelievable. I mean, everything that we've gone through, and they were there just, hey, picking us up and holding us up.
Time to promote again.
Lining up bookings at times was very difficult, because we were doing it on the road and we often didn't have phone reception, and especially Shannon and I would be working the phones in the truck, or Katie on the internet in the RV. Most of what happened with the bookings, we had planted seeds before we left, and as we traveled, we would cultivate those seeds and we would get new growth.
It's hard to describe to them that we're going to be talking about history, we're going to be talking about celebrities, we're going to be talking about the hurricane, but most of it is going to be funny.
We would make flyers wherever we went. We had these wristbands that we would bring and just kind of would always have one on us, that if we met somebody, instead of talking about the show, we would automatically give it to them and say, here, like a card.
We were kind of responsible for, you know, our own promotion. So that led to its own excitement sometimes, because seeing Will and Drag on the streets of Red Cloud, Nebraska, I'm sure was frightening for a lot of the people. But it was also, you know, part of what we were doing to get the word out.
The Evacuation Theater troupe prepares for another performance. Survivors of Hurricane Katrina, they have hit the road to tell their stories.
People love New Orleans.
So that people understand the history, the humor, and the hardships that we faced.
The troupe set out in early September to bring a blend of humor and poignancy to 12 states in 12 weeks.
This is an offer that you cannot refuse.
You know, the audiences are going to laugh out loud, and they may shed a tear also.
Using their own tales of survival and those of others for inspiration.
We interviewed and took and put into an adaptation to put out there.
Have the people who really have been impacted tell the story, rather than the media or the politicians. It's coming just from regular people who lived it.
Hello, world, I guess. My name is William Fanning Schneider of Araby, Louisiana. I am here right now in Red Cloud, Nebraska.
We were trying to get the message out to as many people as we could, and that was a little disappointing that we didn't have built-in audiences everywhere we went. But what was good about it is that we feel like that even though we didn't necessarily reach audience members on the road, we reached people on the road, because every campground that we stayed in, every state park that we were at, every RV casino park that we were in, we met people and we shared our story and we made friends along the way.
It feels like home again. You know, you always kind of remember where you grew up, and they are where I grew up.
we're taking New Orleans to other people, so we're trying to bring our humor to them and our hardships to them. It's something that they can't comprehend. So hopefully, not only will we inform them, but then entertain them.
I found that the audiences were terrific wherever we were. The audiences were really great. It would have been nice if they were bigger in size in some of the places, but everybody who saw the show liked it. For me, it was about having the most number of people see the show. And aside from, the McPherson show, which was terrific, and the one at the Latin School had a large crowd, none of the shows on the road had as big a crowd as I would have liked.
There were like 6 people in the audience, but that was the first time we heard the famous, it doesn't matter if you're performing for 1 or 1,000, you have to give the same performance speech.
Will was the cheerleader. Will was the one who was always up. He was the one that would never get discouraged by anything.
Barry used to make fun of me because I told him this story one time about how when I was at Loyola and we had a really small audience for a matinee, and my director, the wonderful, the beautiful, the talented Don Brady, comes in there and he tells us a story.
When I was in El Paso, I was doing theater, and the theater was on top of the mountain, and it was freezing cold, and only one guy came to show up, and it was a family-run theater, and I told my mom, "Mom, why do we have to do it? Send this guy home. It's only one guy." And then my mom looks at me and says, "Damn it, Donald, this man gave you his time, drove up this mountain in the snow to watch you perform, and you aren't going to give the best damn performance ever."
It wasn't always successful that you're going to have a lot of people, but I've always said if you can touch one person, even if you have one person in the audience, that, at least we were inspiring that one person.
People were so receptive. I mean, I've done hundreds of shows and I've never felt any kind of, respect and love from audiences than I have from doing every single show on this tour. I mean, we always got a standing ovation.
You can play to a small audience, but what happens when nobody shows up? Our advertising efforts were not always enough in competing with Barbra Streisand and the World Series.
Today was the big show. Heart of St. Paul, 600-seat theater, and advertising in places where some people don't even have places. How did the show go, you ask? Well, it didn't. Nobody showed up.
We are here at the not-so-great American History Theater. It's 7 o'clock. We are not on stage because there's nobody there. When we were in the space, discussions and disagreements about content surfaces. Nothing too heated, but differing views as to how this will play, and will they even get it.
We do tailor each show to each venue, and that means sometimes either because of time constraints, because of content and audience, or just because of something new that's added, the show's being changed.
I don't really know how we work sometimes, but it's liquid. That's what we always say. It's always liquid.
In Red Cloud, the show was changed at intermission. At intermission, we're backstage, Barry's huddle, huddle. Okay, we're cutting act 2 totally, and blah, blah, blah. So, it comes together, and all these people are really good at that sort of thing. Thank God, I just do what they tell me.
I was a little worried, not much, because I figured a lot of the messages in the show were universal.
One of the things that was really inspiring for us was outsiders seeing our story and giving us the confidence that it would play in other communities. It would play in small town America, and that the local humor plays. It's not just local, that humor, that what we were doing would work everywhere. And it wasn't until we got on the road that we really were sure of that, but we left with confidence, and our confidence was shaken a couple of times on the way. So we performed in Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin at the Hyde Center, and there were about 200 middle school kids in the audience, and we started and we didn't finish. About 15 or 20 minutes into it, a young principal, first-year principal, was in the audience and started getting cold feet because he thought it was inappropriate.
And our show, it's not what I would consider a dirty show, an R-rated show by any means, but in reflecting the culture and history of our state, it's colorful.
When the truth of the matter is that all we were doing was portraying the ridiculousness of New Orleans, kind of making fun of ourselves. Nothing bad at all, nothing dirty or ridiculous. The show is very clean. It's custom built for young children to senior citizens.
And then we performed that night at Chippewa Falls for the community and not for the students. And it was a small crowd, but it was a real receptive crowd. And the irony of all ironies is that when the show is over, somebody from the school system in Chippewa Falls said, the travesty of this whole show is that every kid in our system didn't get to see it.
We're constantly running and gunning, trying to find the beauty of nature while making it convenient and realistic for the day that follows. We performed for a charter school in Denver. Nice, big, and old auditorium was a performance space, and about 130 multicultural high school students joined us in listening to the voices of Louisiana. The realization that the show can appeal to and move people of all ages, colors, and backgrounds is a welcomed one.
Chicago State University stood out for me because it was the first booking that we knew for a fact that we would have an African American community there. We didn't know, how this would play to that type of audience. And it was fantastic. The people there were so accepting. To be embraced in any community, that you're not from, is a wonderful thing.
And then we wrapped it up with the stories, and it was real powerful. And just listening to the actual people having those live experiences as opposed to catching it on Nightline or hearing the stories 1 year later on the news, 2 years later, whatever. It was really meaningful, and again, we laughed till I cried at the skits, but then at the end, just listening to the stories, there were more tears just rolling down the face. It was really, really, really powerful.
The people there were extremely receptive to us. I had a painting that a friend of mine, Priscilla Betts, had given me, and it was of a gentleman in the 9th Ward in the floodwaters carrying his child out. And Priscilla gave it to me and said, use it in your displays or give it away, do what you think best. So in Chicago at the university, they were dedicating this building that was a library and had a lot of classrooms as well. So we decided that this was the place this painting should be.
Along with the 7 actors of the Evacuation Theater troupe and the 2 dogs that were part of our journey, we were also traveling with a photo exhibit created by Tracy Morris Schaefer, a New Orleans photographer.
Pictures say 1,000 words, but they can only say so much. But this is such a wonderful component to have to this production. I think it sets the mood as people come in. You've seen people go back and forth, and you hear them talking about it. It's been over years since they've seen most of these images, if they have seen them. There are many images that deal with the oil spill, which most people we found don't have it. They don't know about that.
Put a face to the tragedy. People hear stories, but until you see it live and you hear it and you experience it firsthand from the people that experienced it.
It's more than the play and the story that people saw and heard at the performance. It's also the pictures that the troupe brought that are worth more than 1,000 words.
The stories were voices, real stories that were touching. And one of the stories was about a principal in St. Bernard who was put into an unthinkable situation. He was also a part of our Why I Stayed series.
Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I know. I was there. That's kind of what the storm was about for a lot of people. Wayne was a terrific school principal, but who would expect that in your job that you would suddenly be in charge of hundreds of people, and people are dying on your campus, and you've got to ration food and water, and you're making these life and death decisions. He's just an ordinary guy, so were all the other people here, but they were thrown into an unusual circumstance. And when we're in life or death situations, people tend to do what they have to do.
I told Rose, with all the stuff that she was going through with Milton, she was a lot braver than what she thought, because on the stage is the most vulnerable place that you could be to talk about a tragedy that happened in your life.
One of the most personal and powerful stories to our group is Rose's. Rose and Milton met at Chalmette High while evacuating for Hurricane Betsy in 1965. They were married for 40 years.
And not too soon after they returned home after the hurricane, Milton had aortic aneurysm and died in his sleep. And Rose was devastated, and we all were, because he was part of the extended family of our troupe, and he was a great artist, and he was an incredibly talented man, and it was so unexpected.
I play Milton. I play his person up in heaven looking down, Milton in his young, in his prime, in his, how he would want to be remembered in his form.
When Barry asked me to write it, I hesitated, and I talked to Christian. And Christian's advice to me was, if there's something in doing this that is good for you, that makes you feel better, that serves a goal and a purpose, then you should do it. If it's simply ripping your heart out every time, then it's not a good thing. And as I wrote it, it was things that I didn't get to say to Milton. And that's why it became important to me to do that role and to say those things out loud. When Will would be doing his character of Milton, at first I couldn't really hear it without breaking down. But then I began to look at the pictures, and as I'm hearing Will, remember, live in those memories. And that was a wonderful thing to do.
It's a very, very, very emotional part for me. I mean, it's because not only did I know Milton very well and I know Rose very well, but I value them, the highest that you could.
Will knew Milton so well. Milton loved Will. And they had some physical similarities in the height and the dark hair, but mostly because he did the role so beautifully.
If you know Milton, he's 8 feet tall, 300 pounds. He's just a huge man, and he was one of my characters that I used to do, because he's just so big, and he's just a huge guy. And so I used to, not make fun of him. I used to, just kind of joke around with him, do different caricatures of him. He used to always trump his gum. So I used to do that, and he'd talk with her, "Hey, Rose," a real big, deep voice.
And when we walked off stage, Will and I would always hug and cry together. And that, I looked forward to that because it was almost like holding Milton.
You have to appreciate every day you have. And we loved each other unconditionally. We lived the life that we chose in the place that we chose. That's the best anyone can expect.
One of the things that I want to see on the trip and accomplish at the same time is the Rocky Mountains. I don't think I've ever seen a mountain in my entire life. We live below sea level down here, it means you have to look up to see boats. And also traveling the full length of the Mississippi River. I'm very excited about doing that.
Okay, Chris, what's on the agenda for today?
Today I'm going to drive us to the tippity top of the Mississippi River, the headwaters of the Mississippi River, and we shall see how it all began.
And where are they located?
They're located in Itasca State Park. Does it come out of the lake? Out of a tiny lake? Anyway, let's go, and you're gonna love it.
There it was, shallow enough and short enough to cross, either by stepping on stones, crossing a wood plank, or braving the cold water.
I got to walk across the headwaters of the Mississippi River. It was freezing cold, but I said, you know what? I don't know if I'm ever coming up here again, so I'm walking across these damn waters. And so I did. We all did actually. That was the guys, we had a nice little picture. Hiked my pants up, put my foot in that water. Oh, I didn't think I was gonna feel my foot for months.
You know what? I can't feel my feet.
I can't feel your feet either. I don't mind stepping on the glass and the rocks because my feet are frozen.
Yeah!
Woo!
Black and gold Super Bowl. Saints are 3-0, baby. Enough said.
a surprisingly touching moment for us when we were watching the pregame craziness from the Superdome and seeing the folks and the fun and the spirit. We all started missing home and the energy of that place.
It was one of the biggest moments in the city, and we were away.
Tears flowed. And beers. It was good to actually see the Saints beat a team. And not just win, but beat them down.
As bad as the bad has been, the goodness of people has been inspiring. And we're thankful for the kindness of strangers from all over the country and all over the world.
What's been amazing about this tour is the generosity and kindness of folks everywhere we went.
That was truly amazing, and it happened all throughout the tour. You know, people who we didn't know that offered to let us stay in their homes, people who cooked for us, who took care of us on the road, that we didn't know them. We didn't know these people, and they just did it out of the kindness of their hearts.
There was this man in Starved Rock who couldn't see the show, but he had just been in New Orleans as a volunteer to help gut and clean houses, and he handed us $100.
Just the amount of people that came to help our parish, our city in our time of need, without really a place to stay. College students, church groups. They fed us, clothed us, and helped us find any little treasures in our homes. They did these things that... How could anyone come to do this? We could never really repay these people, but we wanted to give something back with this tour.
I thought New Orleans, being a big city that it was, would be back exactly how it was before, you know, up and running. But that's the thing, you know, that we're still rebuilding. I mean, we're barely back to our knees, and we're yet to stand up.
To me, New Orleans is the crazy old aunt of America, in some ways. Lately, you know, things are not doing so well. She's fallen upon some hard times. I'm confident that things will turn around because that's the nature of crazy old aunts. No matter what life deals them, they still keep going, and I'm sure New Orleans will. But part of the purpose of the tour, as I see it, is to get the message across to people that New Orleans is, yeah, alive and well, you know, still kicking, but falling upon some hard times.
The tour, it changed me in a way that there are a lot of things in life that you see and you lose control over because you think it's a big deal, and it's really not. And I would even say that this realization hit me before the tour, after the storm. You know, a hurricane coming to your home and destroying your entire community is a big deal. Your grandfather dying is a big deal. Not being able to find your shoe in the morning, not so much, you know.
I don't get pessimism. I mean, even after everything that's happened to me, and maybe that strength comes from, you know, you have your good times and bad times, but, you know, my mom has endured a lot. So I've always, in most circumstances, have tried to look to the brighter side.
Captain's Log, Day 7. Here are a few mishaps for your enjoyment.
The stairs that lead into the RV at one point broke. So to fix them with the primitive tools I had, I just stuck 2 blocks of wood underneath them whenever we stopped. Done. The first week or 2 within the tour, we realized that we actually had to dump the sewage. And that was an adventure, figuring out how to do that, because we were completely parked and hooked up and ready for the night, and the sun was just going down, and it was beautiful, and one of us went to use the bathroom, and
It stinks in here because we have gone too long without draining the gray water. So now the shower has come up and created a stench.
We had to unhook everything and drive in the dark through the curvy path of the state park that we were in and figure out right there on the spot how to empty the sewage out of our home.
So Chris is kind of the dad of the trip. You know, he drove, he smokes, he's the grown-up, you know. But he fixes everything, he's got real good instincts, and everybody depends on him.
The next mishap, and probably my favorite, was the awning. We get to Oklahoma and the awning falls off. Not off, falls down while on the interstate. So we immediately pull over, and Will and I climb to the top of the RV while everybody else stares in awe at the 18-wheelers swinging by us, the cows mooing in the background, and we duct tape the awning back to the RV.
Genius of duct tape and gum and spit and Velcro, they got it fixed some kind of way.
If it wasn't for Christian and myself, everybody would have died.
Honestly, I mean, I don't think I have any better sense of direction than most people, although I did have a much better sense of direction than all the people on this particular trip. As it turns out, this was a small sample, and they were navigationally challenged.
Tom is a cartologist, I think is the word. He's a map guy. Tom is phenomenal at reading maps. So he had skills of calculating, because we didn't want to be on the interstates. We wanted to take back roads and we wanted to see the country. And Tom was phenomenal. You know, everybody's got global positioning, satellites these days, and everybody's got all of these, you know, things in their car, but we had Tom.
Who was the best cook? Rose, hands down.
And she decided she was going to make muffaladas. I thought, where in the world are you going to get the material to make muffaladas in this godforsaken town? And we went to the little supermarket, and she got this, and she got that, and she said, this will make, I can make do with this, and I'll be done. And she and minestrone soup. So that night, on that freezing cold night, we had just amazing minestrone soup and muffaladas like you wouldn't believe.
Actually, I'm going to say Rose. I'm going to say Rose. It was one night she stuffed meat with more meat. That's good in my book. Captain's Log, Tuesday, October 17th. I would like everyone to know why I'm here. I'm here because this is a chance to grow, a chance to write, to act, to develop skills that I could bring back to my community. I'm here because my family and my friends think that I deserve this experience. I agree. I'm here to appreciate the fact that one of the best parts of any trip is coming home. I'll look at the sunlight leaking through everybody's house. So I guess I'm kind of hoping that maybe the sunlight can heal a broken heart or something, because I look around and everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's house guts are out on a curb for anyone in the world to see. I pray. I pray for those of us who didn't make it, but you know, most of all, I pray for those of us who did. We're the ones that need it, right? Ladies and gentlemen, we are fresh off of our tour. We have been to 15 different states. And I gotta tell you, it is great to be back in a place where you can get away with using the word y'all. It is great to be back to a place where people talk funny and listen to strange music. A place where we eat things that other people hire exterminators to get out of there.
We learned that anyone can come back from anything.
We had decided to move back to St. Bernard Parish, and because this is our home, you know, I mean, there's no other way around it or about it. This is where I grew up, this is where I lived, it's the best community that I've ever been a part of.
Our first show close to home in Carrier, Mississippi brought in full houses with many expatriate St. Bernardians. For the first time in weeks, there was no discussion about whether or not they'd get the jokes. They got it.
And we got the love, good food, and hospitality of our people we had long missed.
Thank you, Louisiana, for the rich history and beauty of our home. We are proud and grateful to call ourselves the Voices of Louisiana.
We began with a vision and a dream of sharing our stories.
We ended our road tour with the love of old and new friends and shared experiences of 7 lives forever enriched and intertwined.
We live where we live because we choose to, with whatever dangers and devils dwell there. The road, this unkempt family of ours, is what we choose for the next few weeks. And the future lies in its unasked questions, just around the next turn.
Thanks for being my friend. Yeah, thanks for being my friend. Thanks for being my friend. Thank you for being my friend. Thanks for being my friend. Another life we meet.
It put a face on the storm, and people at Notre Dame, I knew that they were very interested in helping Katrina, people who have survived Katrina, and there was a lot done at Notre Dame after the storm, and so I figured having real people for Notre Dame students to see would be a great experience, and everyone definitely laughed and cried, and we had a great time, and it was an incredible show.
My toast, thanks for all the times you let me know that I had something hanging from.
And exactly what Louisiana needs in the healing process. I think it's a genuine part of the recovery, and I'm glad I saw it.
Thanks for being my friend. Thank you for being my friend. Thanks for being my friend. Hoping another life we meet again. Thanks for being my friend. Now Tom has a Jerry, and Jekyll has a Hyde.
How great it is to make sure we get back to see it. We've been home, I'm from Nebraska, we've been there approximately 4 or 5 times since the storm. We sit and we try to convey to my family just how horrible it really was, and it's just wonderful to sit here with a couple hundred people that feel and share everything that y'all have been through. It's just incredible. I can't express it outside of this small family we call ourselves. Thank you so much.
Come cheap, if I should die some night in my sleep, everything I have is yours to keep. Thanks for being my friend. Yeah, thanks for being my friend. Thanks for being my friend. Thank you for being my friend. Thanks for being my friend. Hoping another life we meet again. Thanks for being my friend. Thanks for being my friend. Thanks for being my friend. Thank you for being my friend. Thanks for being my friend. Hoping another life we meet again. Thanks for being my friend. Hoping another life we meet again. Thanks for being my friend.